You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Park Rangers Locked On Coogs about Houston and Arizona meeting in a de facto kind of 1-2 mid-season Big 12 championship game kind of atmosphere in Arizona this weekend. A lot of stars on the floor in this one, college basketball stars, guys that have been around the block a little bit. And so the matchups get kind of fun. The matchup to watch, though, is going to be that point guard battle. It's certainly not like guard battle. I say point guard battle, the guard battle between Caleb Love and Milos Uzan. Now, I say guard battle because Caleb Love being a point guard is kind of he's just a guard. He'll start the offense, he'll initiate the offense, he'll catch and shoot, he'll run off screens. He does all the things for them. Caleb Love is their go-to guy in every single aspect. 15.8 points, 4.5 rebounds, 3.3 assists per game. And honestly, that assist number feels low, but you remember like with how much they drive, dribbling it a second time typically kills the assist if the first did not. Caleb sounds familiar. It's not just the heave earlier this season to help them beat Iowa State. They got him on SportsCenter. Fifth-year guy, was at Carolina when they knocked off Coach Krzyzewski and Duke, was kind of all over the screen when that storyline was playing out. For what it's worth, he was also the last ever Pac-12 Player of the Year for Arizona. Last year, he won Pac-12 Player of the Year. He was an all-ACC freshman when he was at North Carolina. This guy's the constant threat to score. He's getting all of the shots. And I want to say, I don't mean that pejoratively, but it makes their offense very predictable. He's getting 14.5 attempts per game from the field and also shooting just over 3 free throws. Their next highest field goal attempts per game is Jaden Bradley at 8.8, right? So that's like a solid 6 more shots per game coming from him than any other single player on Arizona. And frankly, that number gets kind of watered down. You factor in they have a bunch of non-power 4 non-conference games early in the year where he doesn't play the full 40 minutes, right? He plays about 34 minutes per game. Again, you bump that up for a conference game, especially one of this magnitude. He's going to be doing a lot. At 6'4", I think Uzan's the best option to guard him. Pretty thick frame, long enough wingspan to determine to distract him. And I think Uzan's grown into such a great he was a good defender coming in. I think he's grown into a great defender. I think he's the natural matchup there, which means Jaden Bradley, the other guard, I guess probably technically would fit more of a point guard role because when Caleb is off the ball and not bringing it up to initiate offense, Jaden Bradley's the guy orchestrating things. He's 6'3". If his name is familiar, it's because he was at Alabama as a freshman and was in the bench unit at Alabama that came in and beat Houston. Y'all remember that game a couple years ago where Houston was up and then they brought in the bench guys, Nate Oates did, and they just ran like a different offense than Houston had seen. They kind of chipped away and got back at it. Brandon Miller was on that team. Brandon Miller did like nothing against Houston, but the bench guys really kind of saved the game for Alabama. They came back and won in for Tita. One of the only times anyone's ever won in for Tita. It's 7 times is all. And Jaden Bradley was in that bench group. He transferred to Arizona. Was a bench guy last year as well, but was a starting guard this year for them. I think he's an LJ Cryer matchup. Now, when I look at what Jaden Bradley does, he's the next most field goal attempts guy. So I understand some people might be not so quick to put LJ Cryer on him. But I think the deal is athletically, he's a guy that Cryer can keep up with. Again, he's only 6'3", so it's not like Cryer's like really small next to him or anything like that. And frankly, I think we've seen a scrappier version of LJ Cryer in the last 6 or 8 weeks. If LJ Cryer is playing like that, I think he wins this matchup, right? And we know what LJ is going to do on offense, even with the bum pinky. If he can control the Jaden Bradley matchup on the defensive end, I think we're okay. Their third perimeter guy is that Anthony Delorso guy I told you about that shoots it pretty well. He's listed at 6'6". He's a third-year guy. He was at Campbell, a really small school. Just sometimes see pop up in March kind of stuff. He's a shooter, and he is a movement shooter. He is a catch-and-shoot shooter. He is a guy you cannot let get loose. Again, 42% on 3.5 attempts per game. I wonder again if he'd gotten some run early in the season before and had to work his way in as a transfer guy, right? If he'd gotten that run, I wonder if he'd have more authentic look at his stats, because in January, February, he's been pretty solid for them from behind the arc. They've started the last 2 games. A guy named Carter Bryant at the power forward. He's a 6'8" freshman, really athletic, makes really freshman plays. I believe they're going to start Trey Townsend, though, at that spot. Trey Townsend started the previous 22 games, got a concussion. I think he's cleared protocol. If he's cleared protocol and able to play, I don't know why you wouldn't start him if you're Tommy Lloyd over there at Arizona. He's a big, like, bruiser type. He's 6'6", 215, runs, jumps, strong, dives on the floor. He is like, he will pull from 3 on occasion. I guess he's like JoJo Tugler in that way almost. But he's not the shooter type. He is the offensive rebound putback type. He is the dive on the floor, kick it ahead, leads the break with it from his backside kind of type. And hence, and unfortunately, some of that, tough play, got a concussion. He had missed a couple games. I think he's the Juwan Roberts matchup. He'll, again, kind of be there, like, heart and soul and an effort kind of way that way. I mean, everything goes through Caleb Love, but I think they feed off his energy in a weird way. That's kind of hard to quantify, which means that the other big guy, Tobe Awaka, that's the JoJo Tugler matchup. Now, Awaka is a great matchup for Tugler in that they're both about 6'8". They both have really long arms. No one has longer arms than JoJo Tugler, but Tugler's arms Awaka's arms are pretty long wingspan guy. The difference that works for Awaka is he's 250 pounds, right? He's a big, strong, long-armed guy. Played a couple years at Tennessee under Rick Barnes out there. I think the advantage for Tugler in that matchup, well, he's given up about 25, 30, maybe even 35 pounds. I think that Tugler's a lot more finished basketball player, a lot more complete basketball player. And Tugler's not a traditional back-to-the-basket post guy or anything like that, but he's pretty solid inside of 6 or 8 feet with the basketball. I think that still falls to Tugler as far as matchup win, but Awaka is really good. Awaka is one of 2 guys I think I see on this team that would be very much a guy that fits in with the Houston Cougars. The other one is KJ Lewis. KJ Lewis comes off the bench for them. He is all energy all the time. That dude's built like he's 6'4" and a half, 6'5". He's listed 6'5". I think he's closer to 6'4", so I'm going to say 6'4" and a half when I watch him play. KJ Lewis is a DFW kid from, and maybe that's why I think he's a Houston Cougars, from Texas, but the dude's built like a linebacker and kind of plays like one too. You saw one in your local intramural league. The guy that just like is super, super physical and like uses all his physical ability to get to the rim. Lewis is just a sophomore, which I was surprised in looking at him. Dude looks like a 24-year-old man. Again, 6'4" and a half. 210, 215, played at, Duncanville, a big program in DFW. He uses all that size and athleticism. There'll be times where he looks like the quickest guy on the floor. There'll be times where he looks like the most explosive guy on the floor. They're playing at home, so he'll probably have a gigantic dunk. He's big, strong, fast in every kind of way, but he uses it to play really hard. And I think that's why he sticks out to me as a guy that Sampson would love to have too. And anytime you see a couple Sampson guys on the other side of the floor, or guys that could play for Kelvin from a style of play kind of way, it's always man, that could be in for a real fight. Now, I mentioned across the starters, I think Houston wins most of those matchups by slim margins. The interesting thing here will be how the benches go. Because I mentioned KJ Lewis, he and Terrance Arceneaux matchup is very different guys that are both very, like, genuinely Houston Cougars in how they play, even though they're both technically very different in how they play. But they're both going to be a fun matchup as far as when they both come in the game at that U16. Maybe one of them waits to close to the U12 timeout, something like that. But they'll both be impactful in this game. And frankly, if the starters come out to be a wash, the KJ Lewis, Terrance Arceneaux matchup could win the game in a lot of ways, right? The biggest thing working for Houston is, I think, while the backcourt guys, Lewis and Arceneaux, could be almost considered a wash, Houston's bench brings in Javier Francis, and if Javier stays out of foul trouble, he might have the biggest impact on either bench, because they don't really bring a big off the bench that helps them like JVR helps Houston. Now, he's kind of functionally a 6 starter. He started some games earlier this year, and so I know that's kind of a gift. Their best bench big there in Arizona is Henry Vesar. I was correct on that pronunciation this week. Vesar, big 7-footer from Estonia. And I don't want to make him sound unathletic because he is more athletic, I think, than he looks like in the warm-up lines. When he's a 7-foot guy walking around from Estonia, he looks a little stiff, right? But he's gonna have trouble keeping up, I think, with some of these guys from Houston. He's much bigger, so he might make up for it and prove me wrong. I think just athletically, he's gonna have trouble keeping up with some of the guys Houston rolls out at him. I think that might impact his minutes too. When they play big teams, Texas Tech has Toppin, or Kansas State rolls out a couple true bigs. He gets like 30 minutes. When they play like Iowa State, that game went to overtime and he played 16, right? So I think that's going to be kind of what you're looking at here. Now, I've already kind of alluded to what I think is going to happen and some things like that, but I want to get into it in 1 second. But first, I got to remind you today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, as the NBA is tipping off with the All-Star game this weekend, stuff like that, season kind of feels like it's just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that action at the start than FanDuel. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. If you miss some opening tip-off action or whatever, you can bet in the fourth quarter, come back. You can stay in on it all game long through their app. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine those live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, FanDuel is offering new customers $150 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for a shot at $150 back in bonus bets. That first bet hits. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA.